Good morning, good morning. We're back with another episode of the Canadian Immigration Live Q&A. It's all three of us today, and we have this special episode because it's dedicated to this Remembrance Day that we had yesterday. Our office was closed for the statutory holiday, just to pay tribute to those who have given their lives for the freedom and for the country that we can proudly call home. How are you guys doing today?
Good. Yeah, really good.
Oh,
So,
Every Remembrance Day for myself, and for those, like Igor said, who are unfamiliar with it, if you're new to Canada, on November the 11th of every year, we celebrate Remembrance Day, which is to think back and ponder over the freedoms that we have that were obtained through, fighting in past world wars, and the conflicts continue to rage on, right, Igor? And
mhm.
the world is a difficult place, and I think it's important for us to look back and remember what's happened to hopefully learn. And one of the statements that we were taught, I remember even as kids, I remember World War I was the war to end all wars, and that didn't last long. Then World War II, and now it's the some of the things I remember as well being taught as a kid is never again. We never ever want to do this again, so we remember every year. And I think a lot of us have had family that have fought in wars in the past. I had a great uncle, my uncle Ivan. He was a signalman. So basically, what he would do is he would go ahead into enemy territory and kind of scout out and identify where the enemy forces were, and then come back and report. And of course, you're kind of subject to a little bit more direct fire when you do that. And so when he came home from the war, he'd been shot up pretty good. And so he spent a lot of time in the veterans hospital and things like that. His whole life, the rest of his life was affected by it. And and so it's nice to have this one day, and because this live stream fell on the Wednesday instead of the 12th, instead of the 11th, we just wanted to, yeah, acknowledge that. Alicia?
yeah. My grandpa Bernard was in the war in World War II, and he was in the medical unit, and so he had gone there, and there was a lot of. I know he had a lot of. They didn't call it PTSD at the time, but it had affected his hearing from the shelling, and he had a serious hip injury and had to do a double hip replacement from what had gone on, and it had affected his life and my mom and all of our family's lives as well. Um, and he didn't talk about it very much, but it was definitely a big part of his past.
Mhm. Yeah,
Indeed.
I don't have any relatives in Canada. We're the first generation, but
Yeah.
um, we know about war like no one else because we lived through this to like at this very moment. Not me personally, but my father, he's still in Ukraine. My wife's father is still in Ukraine. My wife's sister is in Ukraine. Her husband is in Ukraine, and there are daily bombardments of our town, um, of our towns, like the whole country. There is not a safe place in Ukraine, and it's like playing Russian roulette all the time. They specifically target civilian infrastructure, trying to um, deprive people of heat and electricity and water, and that is just one of the horrors that people have to go through at this very moment. Um, I just recently had a conversation with my grandma, just trying to learn about my heritage a little bit more before it's too late to learn this stuff, if you know what I mean. And I've learned a lot about my grandfather, who actually um, went through the whole war at World War II. He survived, but he didn't last long. And after the war ended, um, he endured like for another couple of years, and then he passed away from the many wounds that he received, like from um, mine explosions, whatever you call it, right?
Yeah.
So that was a painful experience, and my grandma was left as an orphan. Her mother passed away when she was just a baby, shortly after the birth, and then she was raised by her stepmother. And then when her father passed away, she just was left on her own, and she left the home, and she relocated to Crimea, and that's how she found my grandfather, and that's how that line of family developed, and that's how I came to existence. If not for my um, grandfather and whatever he has done, probably I would not be here. Like all of us, right? If not for the people who gave their lives for the life, um, world would probably be a little bit different today, to say
Different
the
place.
least.
Absolutely. So we wanted to just take a little bit of time to acknowledge that and thank you for allowing us the ability to do this. Okay, well, let's transition and let's talk about Canadian immigration. So last week was a busy week. We had the opportunity to chat about the levels plans. Alicia and I had recorded an episode right away to talk about the limited information that had been released, only to realize as we were clicking on end of the recording that they had released the supplemental information. So then we had the opportunity in our live stream to dive in and talk about that a little bit. We've had a week to kind of mull things over and think about where things are going. And there's still a lot more questions than there are answers, but at least there are some positive lights at the end of the tunnel, like slightly increased economic numbers, both through the PNP and the federal high skill, which are express entry. So that's positive, and we talked about this last in our last live stream. So we're not going to spend a lot of time going over it again. But some people are asking questions about the new bill, Igor. And so we know that there's some light at the end of the tunnel with the levels plans, at least a little bit in terms of the economic immigrants. But people are really concerned about this Bill C-12. And when you look at this, it's working its way through the House, second reading. It's at committee level, and they're having discussions about it. But there was a question, Igor, that Eric Apostol asks us. And I think this is an important one for people to understand, given what we have with our levels plans, the processing times that the immigration has laid out. And so Eric says, does C-12, if passed, allow IRCC to revoke permanent resident status without them doing anything wrong? Alicia, do you want to opine on that?
Yeah, and so we do know that various representatives, so the Canadian Bar Association and other international and national associations and groups were putting their comments forward and trying to raise issues that were important when they were debating this. And one of the worries that we have is it's really difficult to retroactively go back and strip people of status. And it ought to be really difficult to do that because once you have your permanent residence, as long as it was not obtained through fraud, right, as long as you didn't lie or fraudulently get it in the first place, generally people should not have their permanent residence revoked or stripped from them. But what the bill does say is that our IRCC wants the power to be able to suspend processing or cancel classes of applications. And we hope that that means there's going to be some sort of logical test and justification for when they can do this. And if they are going to do it, then hopefully it's going to be prospective. Hopefully it's going to be forward facing. They're just going to say, we're closing this program, but they give people notice. Hopefully it's not going to be that they're canceling whole categories of applicants who already have their applications in the queue. But we don't know. We don't know exactly what this will look like. We do know in the past that back in 2020, 2012, they did cancel large swaths of applications because the processing backlog had become so huge. And we start to worry when we see processing backlogs, for example, under the startup visa category or under humanitarian and compassionate right now. We start to worry when we see these huge backlogs and processing queues that maybe the government will try to use this new bill to pull some levers to reduce their backlogs.
Yeah. And just to further kind of dig into your specific question, Eric, you say can they just take your permanent residence away without you doing anything wrong? Well, generally speaking, I can't see a world where they're going to just revoke people's permanent resident statuses without them doing anything wrong. That's the key. However, without Bill C-12, right now, immigration can revoke permanent residence and even citizenship where it was obtained through fraud, where it was determined that it was through fraudulent means, whether it was fake documents or misrepresentation in the information provided. And it was proven to be that, and that the person would never have received that status without having committed a fraud on the government. But without you doing anything wrong, Eric, I will go down a limb and say you're okay. We're not in a crazy world there yet. Okay.
Mhm. Well, let's see. So we do have another super chat, and before we go to that super chat, I just wanted to give a couple of shout outs to @ConnectTV, who says hello, and then Michiko in Toronto says hello. Yes, and let's see. This comment, I like this one, but just one correction: we're not immigration consultants. We are immigration lawyers, just as it says in here, right under the sections where you see our faces.
And
Yeah.
Igor, why is that important? Why is there a difference between an immigration lawyer and an immigration consultant?
Oh, I can talk about this for hours. What exactly you want me to talk about here? There's like very different level of training. First of all, not to say that immigration consultants are less trained. There are some amazing immigration consultants out there, but for us, it takes years and years and years to get our license, and it's so easy to lose it, right? The regulator is a lot stricter when you are an immigration lawyer. You can go after an immigration lawyer if you receive a bad advice or incorrect advice, or if the lawyer is unethical. Try to do that with a consultant. Like, nobody stops you, but the result will be a lot different. And if you will ever receive a result. So there is a little different standard to which lawyers are held by their regulator. And yeah, like there are also some difference in powers, what we can do and what consultants cannot do. Um, Immigration lawyers can represent you in court if you face a refusal, but immigration consultants can only represent you in a tribunal like IRB and not in court, right? So when we receive requests for consultations from people saying, "Oh, my application was refused," I prepared this application with an immigration consultant. The first thing that rings in our mind is like this bell. Oh, like the presumption is that the level of quality would be just a slightly bit, in some cases, lower. In some cases, it would be catastrophically lower. So we take pride in calling ourselves lawyers, not just because it's prestigious. It's just because how we actually uh, try our best to deal with clients in a manner that best represents them and not our pocket.
Yeah. And I think that's important just so that everybody knows. We have talked about fraud and who your representatives can be in the past, but I think it's important just to highlight it again now because we're at a stage where so many people do not have a second chance at trying to apply for PR. And I've had a few heartbreaking consultations recently from people who worked with somebody who gave them bad advice and then they lost out on that PNP draw because there was something in their claimed score that they couldn't substantiate, right? They didn't have the evidence to back it up. And so under the Immigration and Refugee Protection Act, you can only be given immigration advice, legal advice by an immigration lawyer or an immigration consultant, or in some cases, very specific cases, certain types of paralegals in out east. So take a look and make sure that if you are paying somebody for immigration advice, that they are properly registered. You can go to the IRCC page, you can check to see if they have an active license through a law society or through the organization that regulates consultants. And if they don't, then you should not be paying them money because they're not authorized to give you legal advice. So be really careful about that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. We also have a shout out from Joe. Good to catch the trio. Good to see you, Joe. And we do have quite a few questions. Oh, okay. I also need to pull this one up. Fantastic, three Rio. Perfect. All right, so we do have a couple of questions piled up. As I've mentioned, I will start with the super chat. We try to give those a little more priority. So Marco says, from my understanding, there is an amnesty plan in place. If so, what does it include, and is it reflected within the current levels plan? Great question, actually. Well, let's see. I'm just trying to pull up the supplementary information, and then while I'm doing that, anyone wants to start answering? Let's see. It looks like Mark cannot hear us. I don't know. Alicia, can you hear me? Uh-oh. It looks like somehow we got disconnected. I don't know. Can you guys hear me? Just put in the chat if you still can see this live stream. Hello, hello. All right, so people can hear me. Let's see. I'm just trying to figure out how do we get Mark and Alicia back. Just give me a second. I'll try to send them the link so that they reconnect. All right. And while we're waiting for them, let's see. I hope it works. I hope it works. But it's uncertain. It might be something on their end, or it might be a problem with the software that we use. Well, let's see. How do we get them back? That's the main question. And you can see this live stream is all in process. Like, we don't stage anything. If we encounter the problem, then we try to solve it live. Well, let's see. What might be the problem? So Mark says that he's trying to reconnect, but the software says that it's just a pending waiting call, waiting for host to start the meeting. It is possible, guys, that we will need to just terminate this live stream and then restart it again and again. Yeah, Alicia says, mine says waiting for host too. So it looks like there's a problem with the software. So what we will do, we'll drop off right now and we'll restart this live stream. So just refresh our YouTube channel and you likely will see an invitation, not an invitation, the announcement again. And then you can reconnect. So let's see, I'm just trying to do a couple of screenshots with the questions that we've got so that we don't miss those. I will take a screenshot of the super chat. Wow, there are so many questions. Okay, it looks like Alicia can join now. Okay, it looks like it works. Oh, I was just about to finish this live stream. Let me just. Okay, it looks like Mark is joining now again. I don't know what happened. I honestly don't. I was just making the screenshots of the questions that we received and thought that we would need to restart it. All right, so it's all good. You can see how we deal with problems during the live stream. Okay, so let's get back to the question. So this one is from Marco. From my understanding, there is an amnesty plan in place. If so, what does it include, and is it reflected within the current levels plan? Who wants to tackle this one?
I'll address this. Okay, so Is there such a thing as an amnesty plan? Well, yeah, a couple years ago there was some rumbling about it, and it would have been, I think it was the end of 2023. Okay, this was at a different time, different circumstances, and at the time, January 2024, there was something in the works to potentially regularize, if I can use that word, people that maybe had fallen out of status at that time. That was before cabinet. At least that was the suggestions, that it was moving forward and that there would be something. Even back then, I really couldn't see this coming to the fruition or full fruition like people had thought. They did announce the construction worker and a little bit of an expansion on the construction worker undocumented plan. And that was in Minister Miller's reign. But since that time, you guys, when you have a government that's looking to get people out of the country and they're taking significant steps to do that, it seems really unusual or at odds with their overall plans to then turn around and say, hey, but anyone who chooses to stay past the expiry of their work permits will still find a way for you to transition to permanent residence, at least in large scale. So it would seem counterintuitive for that to happen. If that was the case and they were looking at doing some type of an amnesty program, then in my mind, they would rather have people stay in valid status and give options for extending work permits so people can continue to pay taxes and then have an orderly transition to permanent residence. So I'm not saying that those rumblings or those rumors or those things there isn't a source or a foundation for them, because there are. But the reality is that in the current climate, something that this government is going to do for people, where people start making decisions to not go home when their work permit expires and to stay without authorization, my advice 100% is to not believe that. It's just not something that I see happening.
Alicia, what do you think?
Yeah, no, I totally agree with Mark. We did have that out of status construction workers for people in the GTA. That program closed, right? It stopped taking applications in December of 2024. So there has not been a current amnesty program. I totally agree with Mark that it is much better to maintain your status. And if you're running out of time and you're going to lose your status, then go home, because there's usually better options for how you can capitalize on. Hopefully you do have your Canadian education, or hopefully you do have a year of high skilled Canadian work, and then you can still preserve that in your express entry profile going forward. And maybe then you can start to get some targeted experience and have 6 months in addition to being eligible under CEC, and that's going to really give you a leg up. So I don't think ever staying without status is a good option, especially when you have an economic option. But if you do need advice on these things, please reach out and book a consultation, because we are all lawyers. We do these free live streams in order to give people immigration information, but when it comes to actually giving you legal advice, that's when we need to sit down, look at your situation in very specific detail, and then be able to talk to you about what your options are.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to take one more opportunity just to address this amnesty concept. I don't blame anyone for believing that there's going to be some kind of an amnesty coming in the future. I don't fault anyone for focusing on that and hoping for that and praying for that, because there has been precedent to some extent for that. And like Alicia said, yes, the undocumented construction workers is one, but in our very own practice within the last 5 years, we've seen on the temporary side the 18-month post-grad policy that was enacted that basically took people who had been out of status for longer than 3 months. In fact, in some cases, it was 6 or 7, I can't even remember if it was up to 8 months, who'd been out of status, who chose to stay after their work permit expired, for all intents and purposes, continued to work, although that was never advice we ever gave anyone, and magically gave them an opportunity to correct their status and apply for another work permit to get them back into work authorization. And with precedents like that, I don't blame people for thinking, well, they're going to do it again. Like, how can they just ignore us? We've sacrificed so much to be here. And then you have other people who are looking to exploit and take advantage, and and really capitalize on the vulnerability of workers like you. But I can tell you, in this current world, with the current climate, although it's the same political party, they have a very, very different mandate for what they're intending to do. And like Alicia said, we would never ever advise anyone to count on that. And is it reflected in the current levels plan? No, not at all. What's reflected is everybody going home. That's what's reflected in the plan, based on, in particular, the temporary resident levels, which didn't exist back in the end of 2023, 2024, at the beginning, when these rumblings were happening. And Alicia, they really were. Like, I know some of our colleagues in the bar were even posting articles. Like, I saw one on Canada.ca. I don't know if Colin Singer's still practicing or whatever, but one of his articles was talking about discussions within the mainstream media about Minister Miller tabling some form of amnesty program. Now, whether that was the construction worker or it meant something else, there was enough there to even cause someone within our bar to believe that this could happen. But we are in different times, absolutely different times. Okay, but that's a great question, Marco, because you're asking what many, many, many people are thinking, and this is spreading all over. It's like, oh no, there's no CEC anymore. The levels plans don't include CEC, right? And then people who have larger channels then spread information that just isn't accurate. And that was one on the levels plans that we talked about last week, how no, CEC is alive and well. It's just they've rebranded it back into what it used to be, the federal high skill, versus the in Canada and more of the strategic occupation approach.
Right. I just wanted to pull a couple of comments. Technology is wonderful until it's not.
Indeed.
And welcome to the Igor show.
Yes, exactly.
And I think we had like even a little Marvel battle in here. So Spider-Man to rescue and Batman 2 in Frozen, and then we need Spider-Man to entangle the web. And then, oh no, the King of Frozen has kept them locked in time. Who can break the spell? And for those of you who are wondering what the hell they're talking about, we have 2 viewers that join us pretty much for every live stream. So big shout out to those. It's Spider-Man and Batman.
Fun.
Yeah,
awesome.
So those are the heroes who untangled the frozen time web. All
awesome.
Right. Okay, so as I was just having fun with the comments, we've got another live stream super chat, and this one is from Madeira. So she's asking, if I claim points for 1 year Canadian plus 3 years foreign work experience for BCP&P through Express Entry, must I list 3 years of foreign work experience in Express Entry work history section, even if it's not needed for an ITA because I will get 600 points? Or will I include it in personal history?
Yeah, that's a great question. Go ahead, Alicia. I'll throw in my thoughts after.
Yeah, so Nadira, of course, we can't give you advice because we know nothing about your situation other than these 2.5 lines on the screen. But in general, it is always important that you meet all the eligibility parameters for the PNP program under which you are trying to get your category. So if you're looking at BC PNP and it's via an Express Entry linked stream, then you have to, of course, have a federal Express Entry profile that is valid and you're meeting the requirements of the program of the BC PNP. And so if that BC PNP program says that you have to have at least 3 years of foreign work experience, and that's what's going to make sense for your points allocation in your BC PNP points, then it's really important that you justify that in your BC PNP application, that everything that you put in there is accurate, that you have the right NOT category, that you have the right legal employer name, you've got your start dates, you've got your end dates, you've got your evidence that you actually completed that work. And then when you look at your Federal Express Entry profile, now it's up to, are you meeting eligibility criteria for Federal Skilled Worker or CEC, right? Because you have to meet eligibility criteria for one of those programs. And then if you get that BC PNP nomination, yes, they'll add the points, but you still have to justify why you fit everything that was required for the BC PNP nomination in the first place. So I would question, why are you not including those 3 years of foreign work experience in your federal profile? Is there something that's somehow deficient? Do you not have the letters to back it up? Do you not have the pay stubs or the tax documents or something to actually prove that period of employment? Because if that's the case, that's definitely a problem, because BC PNP can ask you for more details about it. And so can IRCC under the federal program.
And I don't really know if I have too much more to add to what Alicia has indicated. When it comes to the express entry process, there are times where, yes, you may change something that you put in your profile, even after you get an invitation to apply. For example, if I have an accompanying spouse that has work history, foreign work history, and we know for express entry purposes that there's no points awarded for spouse's foreign work history. And if that spouse is having trouble getting reference letters or things like that, then in those circumstances, we may actually make a change and say no, I don't have any any work history that I'm claiming points for, and then a clear letter of explanation indicating why that was removed. Obviously, it's to as much help the officer not have to waste their time as the individual themselves, but very, very carefully articulate every ounce of that work history in the personal history section, like you've alluded here. Because that is an expectation that everything is included in there. But even then, if I have a client who already has their reference letters and everything, they come and they ask me to review their application after they've got an ITA and it's all ready to go, and then we leave the work history in there for the spouse, even if maybe it's not awarding any points. So we're very, very careful with what we do. And the transition between PNP and IRCC, there's complete information sharing. And if IRCC wanted to go back, like Alicia said, and look at your PNP and say, hey, well, this work history was there, why is it not here? They'd have the ability to do that. So it's a world it's very volatile right now, more so than ever before, which is interesting, Alicia. I remember when Express Entry first was released in 2015, I remember telling people, look, there's no such thing anymore for Express Entry as a request for information, as a deficiency letter coming back saying, hey, you're missing this, add it to please send it to us so we can continue processing your application. And I used to say, wow, this is drastically changing things. And over time, Express Entry has just become more and more challenging, to the point where now I can almost honestly say that you may never get a second chance if you get an ITA. You may have one shot at it. And that's why we have the course. That's why we have the masterclass. That's why we work closely in the way we do with our clients, because we as a firm can't take a chance that we have missed something or overlooked it. And so this level of forensic evaluation we go through, even teaching you everything that we know when we're working with you, is designed to try to close off every possible avenue of oversight or omission or just small little simple error, because the tiniest thing can mean the difference between you obtaining permanent resident status in Canada and not, especially in a world where, and part of the reason I say that you may never get a second chance is because you may not be able to extend your work permit. And that may be it. Sure, you might be able to go back into the pool, but the reality is you may never be able to get the same points. You may have a birthday. There's a whole host of things. And we cover all of that in the Express Entry Accelerator course, as well as what we deal with directly with our clients.
Yeah, and we're not saying shoehorn everything into an ITA where you made serious mistakes or you could be found to have misrepresented. Because sometimes I actually have consults with people who had a consultant or did it on their own or made serious errors in the way that they represented their past work history or their not code especially. And I have really difficult discussions with those people. And sometimes the answer is, you got to withdraw that profile, you got to fix it, you got to go back into the pool, and you have to have the proper hours or start dates and end dates, or you have to have that knock amended because you just can't get the letter from the employer that you thought you were going to get. And if that's the case, then it's always better to make sure that you're not in a situation where you're going to risk misrepresentation. So you might not get another chance, but sometimes, making sure that you properly fix it and go into the pool is your only chance at avoiding misrep. So talk to us. Book a consult if you're in one of these sticky situations, and we will go through your options with you because we understand how important it is.
Mhm. I see that some people post their questions several times in the chat. Just wanted to remind everyone, just please post a question just once, because it just makes our our job a little bit easier, just trying to sort through the questions. We'll try to go through as many as possible. I see all of the questions here, so if you post it several times, it doesn't increase the chance of getting your questions answered. We'll try to be fair and go through the questions in a chronological order, and I see that some of the questions are just on the list to be answered next. So the next question will be from Sam Rady. So my wife applied outside Canada for postgrad work permit and has a point of entry introduction letter valid till November 2027. Not sure exactly till what date. We are expecting a baby in February, so she can travel. She can activate her postgrad work permit in mid of 2027 and claim 3 year. Can she activate her postgrad work permit in mid of 2027 and claim full 3 years? So just so that we understand, so it's valid till November 2027. So theoretically, mid 2027 still falls in that time frame. What do you guys think?
Yeah.
Can you travel at any time during the validity of the letter?
Okay. So I'm assuming she's outside of Canada right now.
Mm-hmm.
So, and the question, this comes down to the work authorization, or the introduction letter that's issued by Immigration Canada, IRCC, which has an expiry date, which that date generally is linked to when you have to actually travel to Canada to obtain it. Our H-1B open work permit holders are all kind of in the same type of situation. So the question becomes, when that postgrad work permit is issued, will it be issued for the full amount of time as of the day that you appear at the port of entry? And so thus you'd still get another 3 years from that date? Or will that the officer only issue it to the perceived 3 years from the date that the approval came through? So, Alicia, what are your thoughts on this one?
I don't think there's a law on it. I think it tends to be what happens with the officer. And it also tends to be on, well, there is a law in terms of your passport validity. So if your passport's going to expire sooner, that's it, you're toast. It's only going to go to the end of the passport. So that's one thing to keep in mind. But I don't know, Mark, if there's
Yeah.
a specific legislated rule on this.
Mm-hmm. I can tell you that for the purposes of the open work permit, so for example, and my belief, at least understand this is, I'm not giving advice in any way, shape, or form, is that a person would be entitled to the full 3 years on the date they appear to obtain their work permit. For the H-1Bs, one of the reasons why they actually have the policy to allow people to extend is because of that, because an officer at a border issues the permit for 6 months or a year, or whatever they feel was the date from when the approval happened with the online filing, which it's my understanding that that is incorrect. And that is why you can then go in, even if it's unrelated to your passport expiry, and request the full 3 years. And so they're both open work permits. They have different, qualifying requirements, but in most cases, that is what I would expect. But here's the thing: whatever, Alicia or myself or Igor are giving you information here, understand that anything can happen at a port of entry. Just if you went there and say, "Oh no, I was listening to Mark and Alicia and Igor on their YouTube channel, and officer, you need to issue this for the full 3 years, even though this is a year and a half after I obtained my approval for my postgrad," that's going to be less effective for you guys. Okay. But the reality is, if an officer, if you appear and you apply for the permit, and you have 3 months left theoretically from, if an officer only gives it for 3 months because he says, look, your original approval was 2 years and I guess 9 months previous, and so I'm only giving you 3 months. Well, then the next course of action is to book a consult with us, where we would then examine what happened and then make a determination going forward. In most cases, it would be an application to recapture the full time for the postgrad work permit if that was the case once you're in Canada. But understand, like Alicia said, this is a gray area. And I myself have not found clear policy. There may be one of our colleagues, that has an MREPS response that clarifies this, but you can search all over and you will not see a clear indication of how a overseas post-grad work permit, and understand, this is the difference. We're not talking about all open work permits and some blanket policy. We're talking specifically about a post-grad work permit that was obtained outside of Canada with an introduction letter in your specific circumstances. And that's what we're talking about. There's no policy I'm aware of. And why? Because the vast majority, 98%, whatever, of post-grad work permits are applied from within Canada. So that's why it's different.
And the other thing I'd say, and this applies to many, many people, there's always a risk when you leave Canada and then you try to come back in, always. And technically, even if you have a valid document, a new entry is a new opportunity for that officer at the port of entry to examine you. And if you can't prove that you have temporary intent, or if you can't back something up in your application, it is possible for them to amend or change the conditions on your permit, and they can sometimes cancel the permit. So it's always a bit of a risky thing. And I don't know if they're using that as a justification for why they're issuing shorter terms on their documents. It would have to depend upon what is the reason for them giving you a shorter period of time. Because if they justify it based on lack of temporary intent, you might be stuck and you might not be able to recapture further time if you tried to amend that application. So it does depend.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to dilute this conversation with another super chat from Marco.
Yeah, let's tackle it. Let's do it.
Having lived in Canada my whole life, I've noticed our immigration system increasingly creates ethnic enclaves, diasporas that rarely integrate with the wider country. Think Brampton, Surrey, and so on. Would you think country caps can help fix this?
Okay.
Sort of like how they have this diversity visa in the US, where if more people immigrate from a certain country, they
Yeah.
ban that country for the next couple of years.
Yeah. So if you look at our compadres to the south, okay, they have done this for years. They've basically put caps on countries. And so that's why if you're, an Indian national applying for permanent residence, you're trying to transition from an H-1B to green card status in the US, processing times could be 30 years or 40 years, because the demand for those spots there's only so much room. So, obviously any system has inherent biases in it. You can't pretend that Canada's immigration processing does not have biases in it. We look at Africa all the time. We see the high refusal rates. We see just the way that applications are processed, the higher scrutiny. And that has been a known issue. Even when I was on the national executive for years before that, we had battled that. Lengthy processing times, just very, very stringent requirements. Almost, and I don't want to overgeneralize, but where they're questioning more the documents that are being submitted, they just expect there's going to be more fraud, things like that. And so therefore they treat things differently. Alicia experienced this with some of our adoption, and just the kind of the biases that can exist and within the department and within the processing of applications. So to say that it doesn't exist, that's naive. To then focus on Brampton, Surrey, I'm sure what we're talking about here is, in large numbers of individuals from certain countries, and would country caps help fix this? Well, ultimately, that is not something that I can even address. Sure, if you had country caps, then it would mean there'd be fewer people that would be coming in from certain countries versus others. But Canada does not base its immigration policy on country of origin, right? Like when for years, that's been something that we've been trying to get away from, because in the early days, the only people that came to Canada were white, right? And so they've been trying to make sure that we are a multicultural country, which we are. And so these ethnic enclaves that you refer to, Canada is focused on human capital, and rightly or wrongly, individuals from some countries are able to score higher on the comprehensive ranking system. They have higher English scores. Their education is higher. Their basic human capital is higher. And so we'll see. It'll be interesting. One thing I do know is that the government is aware of this. What they're going to do, or what they intend to do, well, they're the elected officials. They can make their decisions. We know that study permits from some countries like India have really taken a hit. So I'm not sure what ultimately is the metrics they're using to find reasons to refuse the study permit applications, but we know the refusal rates have started to climb. So what has changed? Alicia, our good friend Marco paid $20 for a response. So, like,
Yeah,
do you have any thoughts, on this
yeah.
issue? We've got
And I
too
guess,
many people from some countries versus others.
mhm. And I guess I'd question, does our immigration system create ethnic enclaves? Is that fair to say? Because I think the pattern has always been historically that somebody comes to Canada and then their family or their friends or, the people that they know then come to Canada because they act as a draw, right? So that one anchor relative then brings in other relatives, and then you have a connection between people. So you have sometimes it's religious, sometimes it's cultural, sometimes, you've got some other shared family members or something like that where you start to create groups of people. And that's been a pattern for a long time. Um, Canada is really interested in making sure that we maintain the things that make us unique, right? So our cultures and our histories and our families, those are all important parts of what make us up. And at the same time, we need to live together with other people, with other cultures and histories and religions and backgrounds. And there's fantastic sharing that can happen when you have different groups um, being able to celebrate all those things that make them unique. And you can maybe learn more about a culture and a group and a history. And I think that's one of the things, we've always been taught in school that the US is more of a melting pot, right? Whereas we are more of a cultural mosaic. And so that's kind of been Canada's guiding force, that we are a cultural mosaic versus everybody melts down and becomes some kind of homogenous unit. So we are all Canadian, but we honor our backgrounds and what makes us who we are.
Right.
I think
And one thing I'll add, Igor, is, and then I'll turn it over to you, is that we want just the most awesome, coolest, best, parts of your culture to add to us to make us better versus, like Alicia said, a melting pot that's more homogenous. Like, the thing that makes Canada awesome is the fact that we can benefit from the very, very best that you bring to our country. And that's why for me, sometimes it really hurts when I see people bring the very, very worst with them from their country, and it goes both ways. And so I would love for people to just think, okay, how can I, if I come to Canada, how can I make the place better because of what I learned from my country and what I bring with me? And that's what I love most about the country.
yeah.
Go ahead, Igor.
Like I think adding to what you, Mark, said, like I would probably say that we do already have those caps, but those caps are soft and they're like very determined by the uh, political realities that we're dealing with. So, for example, Ukraine, the refusal rate was like 90% before the war, and then all of a sudden it's like almost guaranteed approval. With India, we were accepting so many people from there. Then all of a sudden, we put like a another whatever cap or how you filter whatever you name it, and then the study permit approvals for Indian clients have dropped like significantly. I don't know exactly in terms of percentages. So it's like unlike the US that actually puts it up public, saying these countries are banned from applying for the lottery, for example. Here in Canada, it's like it's done behind the scenes essentially, but like there are some mechanisms that they use to control the population. Like who knows who will be the next favorite for the government, right?
Yeah.
In terms of the numbers of visas that they approve.
And it's important to note that there's a distinction between people choosing to apply and
Mm.
people who are getting their applications refused because they've changed some mechanism within the processing to make it more difficult to get approval. And I think if you look at India as a country generally, when the job offer points are gone, when the ability to transition, and whether it's India or any country, one of the reasons the levels of study permit applicants, why they've been dropping is self selection. People that otherwise may have come to study in Canada for an opportunity to become permanent resident maybe now are choosing, well, that's not worth it because if I come and study, I may very well not have a pathway to permanent residence. Whereas before, our own government espoused the the love they had for international students and how the best candidates for integration into our economic and social network. And so people were encouraged. And like Alicia said, you had friends who came, hey, this is great. I'm a permanent resident. Come. Yeah, I want to come. And then they tell two friends and so on and so on. And so it's important to draw that distinction. Right now, Canada doesn't say you can't apply if you're coming from India. You can't apply if you're coming from Nigeria or from Guatemala or whatever it might be, right? But the reality is there are things that are happening in these countries that, whether it's, that the government is making decisions, and I'll leave it up to the government.
Yeah, and maybe I can also add here. Just recently came back from Spain from vacation. I don't know what you need to do to convince a person from Spain to immigrate to Canada. Like, I'll have to be honest. Other than perhaps you can make more money and you like cold and you like I don't know, you have some
I
family
like the
connections or
tea,
cultural
Igor,
connections.
right?
But it's just like, do we have many applicants from European countries? Not really. Like, we do have some French, we do have Ukrainians, but typically, like, something bad has to be happening in your country that you actually think about immigrating. If you're perfectly happy where you live and you don't have any other like unique life circumstances that
Yeah.
direct you to move out, you probably would stay in that country.
Yeah.
So when we want to admit 380,000 of permanent residents, I don't see a world where half of that would be like from Western countries,
Mhm.
unless they are like drawn here by family or they just like it
Or
here.
opportunity or work or those kinds of things.
Yeah.
And I know we've kind of talked about this at length, but it's a reality. Like lots of people will come for a better life, a better opportunity for them and their family, their future. And often it's not even them. So one of my good friends who started the indoor pickleball facility here in Lethbridge, we were talking just last night, and he's in the process of waiting. I think he's, in the high 20s, the high 520s, with him and his fiance waiting to get uh, permanent residence through express entry. And he said, look, things in my home country are not great. Like the city where I grew up in, it used to be one of the safest places in my country, and now it's just not. So do I love my country? Yes. And would I want to live there? Absolutely. But the reality is, I'm doing this for a better life for my kids, my future family. And that's obviously something that, that affects people. And, it's just like me. If I want to go live somewhere else, it's not that I don't love Canada and my country. If I wanted to go and, if my wife was a little more adventurous, I may very well have gone to live somewhere else just for a different experience. Fortunately, she's wiser than I am, and we have children and responsibilities, and so that's a good thing. That's another reason why you should marry a wonderful woman. They help you to stay grounded. But yeah, this is, Canada is an awesome place. It really is. And yes, sometimes our governments make decisions that they feel are going to be in the best interest of the country, and they don't work out. And then they have to make tough decisions to fix things. And politics are politics. So, everybody, if they make a mistake, they're crucified for it. And unless they can fix it, then, then individuals are, that's how people get real, new parties get elected. And that's politics in a democratic country. But I love Canada. I love the fact that my streets are paved, that my garbage is picked up and taken, that my kids have had an opportunity for a good education, and that I have a home that's comfortable, and that I, as a poor little farm kid with a father who had a grade 6 education and a mother grade 10 education, that I could do whatever I wanted to if I worked hard enough, and that I made sacrifices and things like that. And so that's why I love
So
it.
we have amazing natural spaces that we can enjoy and that we can be physically active and go out into the mountains, and there's deer and there's elk and there's coyotes and there's a natural space out there. And not only that, but if it's winter and your car breaks down and you have to pull over, somebody is going to help you. They are going to come over and they're going to help you change your tire, or they're going to make sure that you're safe while help comes. Like,
Yeah.
Canada's a great place.
Mm-hmm.
And I care about my neighbors, and I know my neighbors care about me, and my neighbors aren't trying to get ahead at my expense, right? That's what it means to be Canadian. It's actually putting others ahead of your own interests. That's why Alicia said, I think last week, queuing up in line. We stand in line because we want to be respectful of other people, and everybody has a fair shot. And those are the kind of things that I think when people come to Canada, they then have the opportunity to experience. That's the wonder of coming to Canada. And maybe that doesn't exist in your country, but here it does. Or the rule of law, just knowing that if you follow the laws, that you are going to be protected by the law. You're not going to have someone who bribes an official to arrest you and throw you in jail because they don't like you, or that the judges and the courts are impartial, and that they're not going to be swayed into making certain decisions just because someone is paying them off, right? That doesn't exist in Canada. And so at least, if it does, well, it's an infinitesimal kind of, example that is just so far outside of the norm. And so those are the things that make Canada a place. And yeah, we have tough times. The world is experiencing tough times. And it doesn't change the fact that my heart breaks for the people I have consults with that are struggling, that want to be here. And now the government says we don't have room for you. Like, it breaks my heart when we're working with people like that. But I still, when I look globally at our country and other countries, Spain might have cheaper bread, Igor, but I'll be honest, like, I love Canada, and our bread may not be as good, but oh,
I'll tell you that, like, after a week in Spain, I love the beaches and the sun and the warmth and the palm trees. But I was glad to be coming back, and I'm like, okay, I'm coming home,
yeah.
because it just I don't know how to explain it. It's not the mentality. It's like, what do you feel more um, like happy? Like, where do you feel happier? Where do you feel more in your own place? Like, where you fit in better? And I'll have to be honest. Like, I will probably remember for a very long time the line at the airport to board the plane to Mallorca. Everyone was like in this group, just like pushing each other. And then you get to Canada, and everyone is like maintaining their personal distance, like all in one line, kind of like the penguins,
Mhm.
like walking
Yep.
slowly towards the gate. And it's just like it's the cultural differences, and for some people you fit better somewhere else. For some
Yeah.
people you just uh, mentally, like, culturally, you fit better here. And for those people who want to make this place their home, if they can integrate, if they can, um, I don't want to say assimilate, because we all want to retain our differences, but at the same time, if you come here and you respect the way the life is in this country, and you try to contribute to it and make it a better place, then
Yeah.
you should be the most welcome person here.
Yeah.
I think that's, guys,
Yes,
is
that
a
was
very
boy,
long
that
time
was
of getting
quite a discussion. But you know what? I think this is stuff people want to hear. Like, what do we think about this? And
right.
I'll just reiterate once again, like, bring your very best,
Hmm.
bring your very best, and let us share our very best with you. And let's see if we can enrich each other's lives and our families and the country.
Yeah. So I'm just gonna give applause to this super chat because it was awesome. Sorry, guys, that we didn't answer most of the questions in this live stream. We're a little bit over time, but we'll try to go quickly through some of the questions that we've got. So um, this person is saying, I still haven't received my GCMS notes after 4 months of applying. Should I apply again? Will it discard my previous request? Please help. It's so hard. It's so hard. We see delays across the board, and no, it won't cancel your previous request, but your new request will just get at the very back of the line.
Yeah. Well, and sometimes, Igor, sometimes for whatever reason, things just get hung up. So maybe tweak it a little bit, your request, and submit another one. There's no harm in doing that.
Hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. And I'd also ask, why are you needing your GCMS notes, right? So if you think that there's something that you did incorrectly, if you missed information in your application, if something needs to be updated, be proactive about that. Make sure that you've gone through your entire application. If you're missing anything, upload it via web form, link it to your application number, because you want to make sure that you're ahead of that in before you get that additional document request or before you get a PFL. You want to make sure that your application has everything in it that needs to be in it, and that you don't have misrepresentation in what you submitted.
Hmm. Next question is about biometrics. Should I submit my new biometrics when I apply for permanent residence? Even after having done that for my study permit application, I received a biometric submission letter through the former application, and they're still valid. So what Nana is saying here is that your biometrics are typically valid for 10 years. And previously, you could use the same biometrics for your PR application. But have things changed since then, guys?
Yeah. PR always forces us to do it again. Mm-hmm.
So there's the answer. Okay, let's move on. I have a personal loan taken for investment purposes 5 months ago, and I also have an account for proof of funds, which accumulated my savings, and it meets the requirements for proof of funds. Can a loan be an eliminating factor? Mm.
So yeah, if you have an obligation to be able to show settlement funds, and so most of the time we're talking about express entry, most of the time we're talking about people who are invited under a targeted draw because they had to meet the program eligibility requirements for FSW. So remember that if you are invited under a targeted draw, targeted draw is not a category. You still have to meet minimum eligibility requirements under CEC or FSW. So if you met it under FSW and when you got your ITA under a targeted draw, it said invited under FSW, then you usually have to provide proof of funds. Unless you happen to meet the requirements for arranged employment, you wouldn't get the arranged employment points, but it means you don't have to prove settlement funds. So take a look at my article on our blog site about that. But when you're looking at proof of funds, you normally have to show that you have accessible funds. So you can't keep all your assets in one account and all your liabilities in another account and only show them the assets. So you do have to show them what are your assets and liabilities to show that over and above your debt, you have enough settlement funds for your family.
Mm-hmm. Okay, perfect. Let's move on. Processing time for LMAs are way different than on the website.
Yeah.
What is the processing time in your experience?
Okay, LMIA processing is all over the map, so I don't really pay too much attention to it. One thing we do know, individuals in the past that were requesting a dual purpose LMIA were put in this awful queue that was basically processing 10, 11 months. And individuals who were submitting LMIAs that were for a work permit only were often seeing between 2 to 3 months. So that's all I can say. I don't put too much stock in what the government posts on their site. Unfortunately, it's not as timely nor accurate as IRCC's.
Mm-hmm. Okay, this question is good. So for non-express entry PNP, permanent residence application that was submitted 19 months ago, IELTS is now expiring. Is it required for the applicant to take a new IELTS and resubmit it? Eligibility passed, currently in security.
No? If you've
No,
submitted your
if
permanent
you
residence.
already,
Go ahead, Alicia.
yeah. And I look like I'm frozen, but I can still hear me.
You
So as
are
long as you
frozen.
can still hear me,
Yeah, we
okay.
can hear you.
Perfect. So as long as you actually submitted your PR portal application, so if this was non-express entry, it would have been a PR portal application. As long as that is in, you have actually proof that you submitted it. Hopefully you now have your acknowledgement of receipt because it's been 19 months. As long as you have submitted that and it was valid at the time that you submitted the application, then those language tests should still be valid and you shouldn't have to do new ones. But I guess if there's a reason that you're worried about refusal, then you might want to just have new language tests just in case so that you can go back into some sort of application pool as a backup option.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm not sure exactly what's happening with Alicia's video, but it looks like she's an AI avatar right now.
Oh, no.
So it's just kind of frozen in slow-mo. Let's see. I hope it goes back to normal. Okay, so Mahanuri says, help me, I would like to come to Canada and how I get resident visa. So for those people who wonder, how do I, what should I, can you help me please? We don't know if we can help you, and can you or should you? To give you the answer, we need to speak with you. We need to know everything about your situation, about your financials, about your job prospects, what exactly you want, a temporary resident visa, a permanent resident visa, a work permit, a study permit. We don't know. So absolutely, if you want to get personalized advice or assessment of your situation, we would direct you to our website at holthelaw.com. where you can book a consultation and we can have a chat. All right, so the next viewer is saying, I'm a permanent resident and a single applicant. I want to get married, but I will register marriage a few months after the actual ceremony. Will it be a problem? What do you think? Mark, Alicia?
Let's see. Okay. I'm a permanent resident and a single applicant. So this individual is already a permanent resident. Is that what they're saying here?
My understanding is yes.
I want to get married, but I will register marriage a few months after the actual ceremony. Will be a problem. We need more information. I don't even know how to answer this. I'm not sure what's even being asked, to tell you the truth. Is it a permanent resident applicant? Like they're just applying as a single? Yeah, this one will need more information because I'm not sure exactly what's meant here.
Okay, we'll move on to the next question. So I'm a South African chiropractor working in the Philippines. Is chiropractic work in demand in Canada? Is this environment a bad time to think about working in Canada?
I'll let you, Alicia. I'll let you address that one.
Yeah, I mean, hopefully you can still hear me. The
We
video,
can.
I think,
We
is
can.
all weird. All right, take a look at your general eligibility, right? So if you're generally eligible under federal skilled worker, then you can go and you can take a look at, okay, how do you actually qualify for a targeted draw? And could you qualify for a targeted draw? So if you're looking at federal skilled worker, Igor's pulling it up,
Yeah,
it
chiropractors
always
on the
says,
list.
yeah, it always says on there you have to meet program eligibility for one of the main categories. And if you're looking at federal skilled worker, people should understand there are actually 2 points grids. There are the selection mark pass point of 67 points on the selection grid. And only if you have more than 67 points on the selection grid could you be even eligible to go into the pool under federal skilled worker. And then that's where you take a look at your comprehensive ranking score. So if you meet the 67-point pass mark, then you can go into the pool. And if you have a high enough CRS that you might be eligible under a targeted draw for healthcare, maybe there's a chance.
Mm-hmm. One thing that I also wanted to add here, though, is yes, they say that chiropractors are in demand and they want to attract more healthcare practitioners. But what we see in practice is that if you search by healthcare draws, we didn't have many, right? So, health. Okay. So we had one in October, one in August, July, June, May, and then November last year. So, will your CRS score be high enough, higher than 472? We don't know. But if it's higher than 470 and above, then perhaps there is a chance. But to tell you if it's a bad time to think about immigrating or working in Canada, it's very individual. It's very subjective.
And I'll add one thing in just for context to Igor, because we see we got Alicia back here. Great. So the reality is, if you have a master's degree, I've talked about this in the past. If you have a master's degree or professional degree, I think chiropractor's on the list. You are 29 years old. Good luck being 29 and being a chiropractor, but 29 years old. You have 3 years of foreign work experience, and you have English at a CLB 9, which is 8 in listening and 7 in the other abilities for the IELTS. Then you are at 469 points. So if you are not 29 and you are 30, you've lost 5 points. If you are 30, 31, you've lost another 5 points. So the challenge that you have as a chiropractor looking to immigrate to Canada is that probably your age is putting you down below the threshold for even that category-based draw if it's in the 470s. Now, if you speak a little bit of French, things are different.
Yeah. All right. Speaking about French, we have another question. So I have 11 months left on my postgrad. I studied French many years ago, but do not remember most of it anymore.
Brush it up. Go brush it up.
Yeah, that's the only
Yeah.
solution.
It's your only solution. Well, sorry, I'm not going to say that. Remember, you guys, we've talked about this a lot before, and if you're new to the channel, the reason we're so heavy on French is one, the pathways to permanent residence are more plentiful. And two, even if you're in your journey learning French, if you hit an NCLC level 5, then you have the potential of extending your work permit and staying in Canada longer, which is a huge, huge bonus. So, and then you've got more time to continue studying and practicing and preparing to hit that level 7. And maybe in whatever period of time you have left, our federal government will not make changes to the heavy emphasis on French. And at least at this stage, there's no indication that they're going to do that. In a year or 2 years, when you might be able to have officially learn French, which you should be able to do, then maybe there are pathways. But here's the kicker, you guys. Just like in the early days when people spoke French, it was their natural language. Boom, they were in. Anyone who is studying French right now is going to add to the mix. So in 1 year's time, when we're telling everybody to learn French, guess what happens to the CRS score when everybody now speaks a certain level of French? It's going to then keep those scores high. So it's like, I've used this analogy before, and I know our time is quickly running out. It's like it's like a group of 7-year-old football players, soccer players, and they're on their teams they're like a swarm of bees chasing honey with the ball on the field. The ball gets kicked to one side, and then everybody runs over to the one side, and then it gets kicked over to the other side, and everybody runs over to the other side. Well, to a large extent, that's kind of what our immigration programming is right now. The way it's structured, whenever there's a shift or an emphasis in a certain area, whether it's an occupation or whether it's emphasis on French, people that want to stay will then take whatever steps they can to try to fit within that new opportunity. And that has its own inherent challenges. And everything we're talking about today applies as of today. And in a year's time, we don't know exactly what the world's going to remain high.
For a second, I almost had a heart attack. I thought that you also got frozen, Mark, as well.
Mhm.
I'm not sure what's happening with the server today, but it's definitely not good. All right. So next question is from Pratik. So my wife is on a closed work permit, which is expiring in June 2026. I'm on a dependent visa on a spousal open work permit. How can we extend our work permits? Before you answer, I'll just click this sound. We don't know. Like, this gives us a good context. It's a very valuable information for the start of our analysis. But to understand what options you have, we need to know more. Can the employer support your spouse and get another LMA? Can you find an employer with an LMA? Do you consider going studying and then your spouse transitioning to a spousal open work permit? We don't know any of that. So absolutely, we would direct that you book it and reach out for a consultation, and then we can talk. For some people, there are not many options, and the options that we propose are not something that they like to hear. But we tell you what you need to hear, and if there's nothing that you can do, we will tell you that. All right, let's move on to the next one. So IRCC has given me CC points 1 month before my 1 year anniversary, before he hits 1 year of work experience. If I get an invitation to apply within the next month, should I accept it? And this is very, very important question. So Mark, what do we do with the clients that find themselves in this situation?
And this happens quite frequently, you guys, because express entry rounds things up. So although your address, you indicate by the very day that you've been living in a location, when it comes to your work history, they go by the month. So you could potentially start work on the last day of the month. That whole month would then be given to you as credit. So it's possible that people can get an invitation to apply under CEC earlier than their 1 year anniversary. Now, I'm going to point something out. That really should only happen for people who have otherwise qualified to enter the pool through the Federal Skilled Worker Program. Because if you don't have foreign work experience, then at some point in time, you've lied in your application. you've misrepresented that you have 1 year of work experience just to get into the pool. I'll leave that aside, and we will treat this situation. Whenever you're here, IRCC has indicated that if you do get an ITA early, then the rationale, at least how they've explained it to us, is to wait until you have fully met the 1 year and then submit your EAPR, which within the 60 days that they give you, that shouldn't be an issue at all. And one piece of advice that I would give you is that you do not get your reference letter from your Canadian employer signed until after you've hit the 1 year.
Exactly. Yes. All right. This question is from a person who has 520 CRS points and is wondering if there's a chance for an ITA. I think we also had something similar from this viewer. So do you think 525 CRS is a good, strong score? My postgrad expires next year. So let me just pull up the rounds of invitations and we'll take a look. All right. I'm not sure. Alicia, are you still with us? Can you hear us?
I'm still here. I can hear you. I think my video's all messed up though.
Yeah. Alicia, maybe you want to answer this question.
Sure. So CRS scores have bounced around quite a bit in the past, but more recently they have been very high consistently. And so Mark and I used to have a little crystal ball in when we did our little live streams.
Yeah.
We don't have the crystal ball with Igor. We do have the fun it depends, which is probably relevant here. And so it depends on a couple things, and it depends on whether you might have eligibility under a targeted draw. And it also depends on how long your work permit is going to be able to be valid. So if you have a work permit that's valid for some time and you have a score of 525 and your work is going to actually hit the 2nd year anniversary or the 3rd year anniversary, and therefore your points are going to go up. And here's the kicker, you're not going to have too many birthdays where your age points are going to go down too much, then maybe that 525 is a decent score that could get you an ITA. We've seen that the score consistently has been around 534, 533 for the last few draws under CEC, unless you're looking at a targeted occupation like healthcare or francophone. Those are the big ones. There have been like 1 or 2 educator rounds of invitations, but there have been 0 STEM.
Mm-hmm. And it's also important what the government does, right? How often they conduct their rounds of invitation, because you can see here when they did 3 draws of 3,000 back to back in June and early July, then the score went down to 518. When they did less frequent draws, or 4,000, then the score only got to 521. And then they did 1 small draw, which again bumped the score to 547. So it may really depend on the government and not you whether you get an ITA or not, because it's just impossible for us to predict. Now they do 1,000 invitations in each draw, and you can see this doesn't lower the score. So it's a lottery. All right, let's move on. It's been twice the processing time compared to RCC posted timeline for work permit outside Canada. Is it common these days?
Yes. Yeah. Just understand that these processing times are going to remain quite high across the board. So I don't know what other else to say other than yes, it's common.
Yeah. Myself, it was reevaluated and final result came on June 8th, 2024. So is my test valid until June 8th, 2026? Also, does the test need to be valid only at the ITA or when you submit an EAPR?
So answering the last question, your test needs to be valid at the time you submit your EAPR, and it's 2 years from that date of the result. So if it's reevaluated, then it flows from June 8th, 2024, 2 years from that date.
Yeah, so you may see here, when you search language test text per century, your test results must be less than 2 years old when you submit your application. So here you have the answer. Let's move on. Okay, so if I have 1 year of Canadian work experience then a 2 year gap, and another year of work, will I still get CRS points for the older work experience in Canada, since the 3 year limit is only for CC eligibility? Well, that's a very, very good qualifier here. Um, Mark, what about the work experience that falls outside the 3 year period?
Yeah. Alicia, are you still with us here?
Yeah, I'm still here. So you
Yeah,
can
go
still
ahead.
get work experience, but you can't necessarily qualify for CEC unless your work experience is within the 3 years prior to when you're submitting your application. So you can count it as foreign work experience effectively if it's outside of your 3 year window.
Yeah.
Mhm. Great question. All right. Do you assist people already in Canada seeking asylum, like if you were here on a temporary permit or study permit?
No, we don't do that within our firm. We would refer you to some of our colleagues that focus on that area of law.
Okay. What are the chances of a Canadian tourist visa applicant getting approved if an applicant overstayed in Europe for 3 months 5 years ago, but is now freely traveling again to Europe without any restrictions? So, does the prior history of overstay work against you?
Yeah, it does. So it doesn't matter how long ago it's been. If you have had a prior history of overstaying in a country, it is a factor. Now, is it determinative in resulting in a refusal? Well, maybe not. There's a whole bunch of different factors that have to come into play. But one thing's for certain, you need to disclose it. And that's something that individuals have had problems in the past when they haven't disclosed, and it's come to the attention of immigration in Canada. And then that's where the misrepresentation in 5-year bars happen. So we're not saying that it's going to result in an automatic refusal, no, but it will play a role, and you have an obligation to disclose it.
Okay, this is a wonderful question. What are the documents required to prove remote work experience? And is it a gray area if I work for a cybersecurity company and some emails are confidential? Is it mandatory to share those emails as proof of my work experience?
Yeah. Well, in these types of things, proving self-employed work experience is one of the most difficult things to do within Express Entry. We cover this extensively in our master classes for Express Entry. We spend an unbelievable amount of time with our clients as we're going through the Express Entry process. And whenever we're working in any type of a remote situation, evidence that you are doing the work, that you have worked the specific hours, at least 30 hours a week for full time, that your work is continuous. If it's the federal skilled worker program you're trying to qualify through, all of those become challenging with remote work because there's less, um, structures in place when you're working remote compared to working actually in the physical premises of an employer to confirm that you are meeting the requirements to claim that foreign work experience. And so we spend a lot of time on this. I just had a client, if I was to show, oh my goodness, the amount of documentation we provided for that self-employed work, it's probably 5 times as much now as when I first was proving self-employed work, when Express Entry initiated over 10 years ago. And so it's a huge thing. It's a big deal. And being gamer 9949, I recommend you book a consult.
Mm-hmm. This question is wonderful. Undocumented in the United States, married to a Canadian citizen since June 2025. What is the ideal time to apply for outland spousal? Being undocumented in the USA, would this impact the outland process?
Hmm. Alicia, do you want to tackle that one?
Yeah, I literally had a consult along these lines. And again, it really depends. I would need to know more about your relationship. I need to know more about who the Canadian permanent resident or citizen spouse is and how long ago did they get their permanent residency and were they sponsored themselves? How long have you been dating? How did the relationship progress? In terms of the person who's undocumented in the US, did you ever have a violation or a criminal charge or offense in any country? So, what's the status of what's going on for you in the US? Did you ever try to come to Canada in the past? And did you disclose that you had made an asylum claim or did you disclose that you had refusals on visas in the past? All these things are really important. And I will touch on that or the questioner who said something about delaying the registration of their marriage certificate.
Yeah.
That's usually pretty iffy, right? I've had instances where people said, well, we got married, but we wanted to file an application in the meantime. And so we just delayed registration of our marriage until after that application in order to get an immigration advantage. That's all very sketchy. So we would need to know quite a bit more about your circumstance to figure out, you know, is it something that would cause the officer to question your admissibility? Or is it something that would cause the officer to question the bona fides of the relationship? Or is it just something that maybe you can legitimately explain? And as long as you're honest, maybe that's not going to affect the spousal sponsorship, but we would need to know a lot more.
Right. And many people treat immigration eligibility requirements as a checklist. Am I married? Check. Okay, now I'm eligible. Doesn't work out this way, right? Like, you need to prove to the officer that it's not a marriage of convenience, that you didn't get married just to get an immigration benefit. And then I also wanted to tackle the second part of the question. Being undocumented in the USA, would it impact the outline process? It actually will. And just recently, I don't know if you guys noticed this, they've changed the requirements for biometrics in the US. They specifically highlighted in bold that you must be legally in the US,
Yeah.
which is, if you're not legal, then you may not appear at
You do
these
the ASC or the
locations.
VAC. Yeah.
Yeah. So you need to leave the country. And I'm not exactly sure if that's a political pressure from down south to, I don't know.
But the
Like,
VAC, I could see
what's,
the ASC, but the VAC, yeah, that's a huge concern.
yeah. All right. So we've gone 34 minutes over time, so almost double the time that we typically spend answering the questions, even though we have a ton. So we had 100 comments. At least that's what I see on my end. There are many questions that we haven't answered yet, just because this was a very interesting live Q&A today that we dedicated to a special topic. We shared our own family stories related to war and those who have fallen. We've talked about why people would want to move to Canada and why not. So for those of you who haven't had their questions answered, we would see you next week at 10 a.m. Mountain Daylight Time, and we'll try our best to answer your questions then.
And you
And
and you can also, anyone who, like, I look at some of the questions that are here that are really good questions. Many of them would be best suited for an immigration consultation. So we'd recommend that you book. The reality is there's nothing more challenging for Alicia, Igor, and I than to have people book consults with us at the late stages of their immigration run here in Canada, when they're running out of time, when the options are very few and far between. The tools in our toolbox are being slowly stripped away by immigration. And the things that we might have been able to help with before may simply not be here anymore. But the more time you can give us, the more advanced opportunity to connect with you, talk about strategy. Hey, if you want to do your own application, that's totally fine. You don't need to hire us. But oh boy, booking a consultation well in advance is absolutely better than waiting until the last minute, because there may be things we can help you to adjust now that will give you time to increase your chances in the future, or help you to correct paths that you're on that are just dead end. Those are the things that we can really help with these consultations. So I recommend that you do that.
absolutely. All right. Well,